Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of STOCAST. This is the last episode of STOCAST that I will be recording using my phone microphone. I'm getting a new microphone in the mail tomorrow. I was going to take a break, but the new announcement of the new TFO dragged me back in, so I decided to go ahead and try and re-record the last STOCAST that I scrapped because the audio quality was just simply too bad, and after cleaning it up, it was inaudible. So that was the catalyst for me to order the new microphone in the first place. I'm sick of my audio being garbage, but hopefully this one will still be okay. And I wanted to talk a little bit about stealth builds and all that stuff. I think we're starting to lose a little momentum on that. Maybe not. It's kind of hard to tell. But I have been pretty absorbed with it for a little while now, and I just wanted to talk about it a bit more. And basically, some of the stuff that I found out, I am going to put out a video, a sort of scripted, polished video where I give suggestions and report my findings, and it's going to be nice and neat. But I just wanted to have a little bit more of a casual conversation about it and maybe talk about some things that that aren't going to make it into the video so that it can be tight and on point. And one of those things is the fact that the wiki has the wrong information for Intel team, and I don't blame the wiki or anyone who uploaded it. I don't really remember, but it's possible the information that's on there is just outdated and that it got changed and the information never got updated. It's nobody's fault. That stuff's all done by volunteers, so I don't blame anyone for having the wrong thing on there. But, you know, it's just important to know these things. It's a great resource, but it's not always correct, and it has very similar text to the text used for evade target lock. And if you look at the text for evade target lock, because you can go into the game, and if you go to click on a bridge officer and then you click on their skills, not the ones they have as their default tray, but if you just look at the big list and you click on a skill there, the tooltip is going to be more detailed than the normal one you get. And that text for evade target lock says that you get 1 second of targeting immunity, but it also says that it causes enemies who have you targeted to lose their target lock on you. I don't remember the exact wording because I don't have it in front of me, but that same description, the bit about enemies losing their target lock on you, is in the wiki description for Intel Team, but it is not in the description in the game. And also, more importantly than that, it doesn't actually do that. Intel Team can prevent you from being targeted, but it will not break a target that's already on you. And this is critical because when it comes to stealth builds, the name of the game is to not be targeted. The stealth or not stealth or whatever kind of doesn't really matter. The big picture is that you're trying to not be targeted by the enemy. If the enemy has you targeted, you're in trouble. And Intel Team can give you 90% uptime on being untargetable, but if during that 1 second you get targeted, you're done. Because even though Intel Team will come back online 1 second later to make you untargetable again, the enemies that have you targeted will still have you targeted. You can test this for yourself. One of the things that Intel Team does is that it lowers your threat. It gives you a threat reduction, and I think you may have the appearance, the illusion of having your target dropped from the enemies, because if you use it, you may see that your target has the enemy has switched to a different target, and that's probably due to the threat reduction. Because if you go in a controlled environment, and I tested this extensively, where you are the only thing they can possibly target, and you let them target you, Intel Team will not break that lock. And so it's very important that you have some other way to protect you from being targeted. Intel Team is the big one. Fresh from R&R plus Intel Team, that is the most critical. That 90% untargetable is really, really huge. And that will cover you almost the entire way. But you gotta have something for that other 10% of the time, that other 1 second. Evade target lock sounds like it could fit in there, but the cooldown is too long. And you would also have to have the timing on it worked out, so even if it did have a low enough cooldown, it would be very difficult to manually, get in there. So that would still be an issue. I said in the Section 31 review that there were no AoE placates. That is not true. There are AoE placates. It's just that they don't work as well as you would want them to. For example, there is diversionary tactics, which is a clicky you get from the strategist skill tree, and that does an AoE placate, but the cooldown on it is very long. You also have pseudo submission, which is a personal space trait, and if you're trying to do, any of this kind of stuff, you're going to have to dip into some of these premium items, right? There's no free-to-play version of this because Fresh from R&R is absolutely mandatory. Exodus Active Probat, in my opinion, is not 100% mandatory. There are alternatives, but they're not as good, right? So let's just get honest and say that straight up. Exodus Active Probat is the best thing you can get. Not because it gives you 500 stealth, because 500 stealth is not actually that big a deal. I said that Starship Stealth was its own skill, and it is, and there are ways to stack stealth, and you can easily get to 500 stealth without that skill, or without that trait, without Exodus. But here's the problem: you have to have some way to activate it. Stealth only works if you have an ability that activates it. It doesn't just work innately. So it's obvious, just empirically, that Exodus Active Probat not only gives you 500 stealth skill, it also triggers your stealth. Because if it didn't, it wouldn't do anything. And you can try that out as well. Just get a build, have Exodus on there with Fresh from R&R and Intel Team. Go in there, try it out, then take Exodus off and go in and try it again, and you will notice a huge difference. So clearly Exodus, even though it doesn't say it on the tooltip, it clearly does activate your stealth skill. Otherwise, the stealth from it would be kind of pointless. So, it's a big deal because using it gives you really good protection for that 1 second to help you not be targeted during that Intel Team. I don't know why every siren in New York decides to go off when I record one of these things. Anyway, so Exodus is super good, but placates, there are a couple AoE placates, pseudo submissions and AoE placate, but the problem is it's so fragile that what ends up happening is that you use it, it placates the enemies, but then as soon as you damage them, and you're basically trying to damage enemies all the time, whether you're doing a cannon scatter volley, fire at will, science stuff with gravity well, or whether you're doing torpedoes with torpedo spread from entwined tactical matrices, or whatever it is, you're doing AoE damage like crazy, and as soon as they take any damage, it basically breaks. So while it does technically work, in practice, it doesn't really cover you as well as it should. And the minimum cooldown on pseudo submission is 15 seconds, so you're really only going to be able to break your target, every other cycle of Intel Team, so it still doesn't give you complete coverage. There are other ways to get combat stealth, but a lot of them disable your weapons. You can get an enhanced battle cloak that will allow you to fire torpedoes and launch mines while cloaked, and that does work, but there are very few ships that actually have that, and there's only one that you can get that's a fleet version. And then on top of that, you could try skills from, other specializations, talking about ambush point marker, but, then you have to have a ship with both intel and command, so again, that narrows it down not only to a small number of ships, but also a small number of premium ships. So really, if I was going to come up with alternatives, and I am going to come up with alternatives, they're really only good for advanced. The DPS requirement for elite difficulty is so high that you can't afford to make a bunch of opportunity costs. You can't afford to clog up your build with a bunch of extra junk. And there's a very small number of players who can even do the damage to begin with. So even if you forget about survivability, even if you had a cheat button that made you invulnerable, just the number of people who can even do the required DPS to get through an elite ISE solo is very small. So, if you're that kind of player, then number one, you don't need my advice. You don't need my help. And number two, you're going to have all the stuff, right? If you're that kind of player, just get Exodus Active Probat. It works great. It has a small footprint. It gets the job done, and you're probably the kind of player who's going to be able to have the resources or to be invested enough in the game to get that. So that is an issue there. But if we're just talking about accessibility, which is a big thing for me and my channel and what I like to offer when I do builds and stuff, the YouTube does not need another person giving out meta builds and high-end builds. I think there is a space for taking the really good stuff, the really fun stuff, and making it more accessible. That's the space that I try to fill. So there are going to be some alternatives that are not going to be good enough for elite, but they are good enough for advanced. And one of those alternatives is to simply not bother and just tank the damage, because the truth is that advanced difficulty is just not that hard if you have a proper build. It's not that difficult to make a build that can do enough damage for ISA and also tank all of the damage. And I've done that with quite a few ships. You don't even have to use a particularly good ship. I've done it with the Jupiter. So, one option is to just not bother. If you just have fresh from R&R and Intel team, that goes a pretty fair way. Yes, you're still going to get targeted. Yes, it's nowhere near as good as Exodus, but it's not terrible. And then you can stack a few other things on there, and that's good enough for ISA. And it's certainly good enough for ISN, if anyone's even doing that. So threat reduction is something that works, just making sure that you have a lot of other targets, making sure you have lots of hanger pets or summonable allies or whatever, fleet support and, devices that summon pets, and mines are another big one. And I have a few tips and a few other suggestions for maximizing those things to make them work the best. But if you stack a bunch of threat reduction and you make sure that there's a lot of targets, then you can get by with just having fresh from R&R and Intel team, at least for advanced difficulty. And if you really do have super amazing, humongous DPS, you could probably do it for elite as well. But you'd probably have to make too many sacrifices. And again, if you're that kind of player, you probably have Exodus anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about those things. I'm probably going to post something on my community tab showing the difference between the in-game tooltip on Intel team and the actual description on the wiki. I would change it myself, but I don't know. I tried changing something on the wiki before and it didn't go through. I don't know if I didn't have the right permissions or I was doing it wrong or whatever, but yeah, so there's a lot. I've done a lot of testing. I've spent a lot of time on it. I've spent a lot of resources on it. And I am going to distill this down into the most accessible alternative I can come up with that does not require you to have Exodus. But at the end of the day, if you have Exodus or you can get Exodus, you should just use Exodus because it's really good and it basically does everything for a very small footprint. And I know this has been a bit rambly, but that's sort of the point of these podcasts anyway, is that I'm just speaking my mind freely and just talking the talk and saying whatever on a particular topic. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Hopefully it sounds okay. And then I'll get a new microphone, and when I see you guys on the next STOCAST, it'll sound buttery smooth in my dreams, and we'll see. So until then, have a great day. Enjoy the nice weather wherever you are. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Bye.